Good evening, everyone, and welcome on this very hot evening to this Time to Speak Up for Palestine rally. It's a timely event taking place as part of the online Arise, a Festival of Left Ideas, and it's hosted today by Labour Palestine. So to introduce myself, I'm Amy Smith. I'm a Labour activist and I'm also a volunteer for Arise Festival. And last year I was one of the delegates from the constituency Labour parties that successfully passed the strongest ever motion yet in solidarity with Palestine at Labour Party conference. So gathering together today, we stand by that motion and all it expressed in terms of solidarity with the people of Palestine. We're meeting at a vital time for all of us interested in campaigning for Palestinian rights, following not only that historic motion passed at conference, but also groundbreaking reports from Amnesty International and others on crimes of illegal occupation. Last year, the world condemned a real intensification of hostility from the Israeli government towards the people of Palestine. The international community and the Labour movement widely condemned Israel's militarised violence against the Palestinian people, including the attack on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the forced displacements from Sheikh Jarrah, and the deadly assault on Gaza as well. More recently, the international community have condemned the killing of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. Signs are that such aggressions may be about to intensify again, clearly acting against an independent state for Palestine and the Palestinian people's right to self-determination. News attention on Palestine waxes and wanes, but the struggle of the Palestinian people for their human rights does not, and it will not. In this context, it's also both good and vital to see so much support for the people of Palestine in the Labour Party, the Labour movement and beyond, including through and a lot of interest in the work of Labour and Palestine, plus the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, with nearly 10,000 people from over 600 constituencies signing Labour and Palestine's Labour Must Speak Up for Palestine statement. So to quickly introduce Labour and Palestine, we are a platform launched at Labour Conference 2018, and we're proud to be supported by ASLEF, the CWU, NUM, TSSA, Unison and Unite the Union. You can also follow us on Facebook if you search for Labour and Palestine, and Twitter at Labour Palestine. And you can add your name to the aforementioned statement, which will be posted in the links in the chat. So we continue to put the case that Palestine, now more than ever, needs a strong progressive Labour voice on its side. And now we must speak up for Palestine again and ensure that it doesn't slip down the agenda. So we've got a great lineup for you today of speakers, and I'm going to move on to them now. So up first, we've got Belle Ribeiro-Addy, who is MP for Streatham. So Belle, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I think it's really important to set out in the first instance, you know, as Amy said about the Labour Party, that we are a party, and as part of our foundations, we've stood on the idea that we support human rights and we support the right to self-determination. And we have to realise that when an issue at times perhaps isn't as much in the news, it doesn't mean that it's gone away. We have to recognise that it's only getting worse for the Palestinian people, particularly when it comes to their human rights. Now, we've heard about the various different human rights reports that have gone on, and that have made very, very clear all of these issues and details, and the need for more international action and greater awareness. And we see this also by the fact the International Criminal Court is holding an inquiry into abuses committed in the occupied Palestinian territories over the past years. Now, in the past few years, again, we've seen instances where the international community has widely condemned militarized violence against Palestinian people, including the attacking at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the displacements of people from Sheikh Jarrah, deadly assaults on Gaza, and more recently, the murder of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. And not just that, but that showing that even in death under occupation, Palestinians are denied their dignity, as we saw what happened at Shireen Abu Akleh's funeral. Now, more and more people are speaking up and coming forward and talking about the issue of Palestine, but it's important that those of us that are activists continue to amplify this message, so that it doesn't leave the agenda, because we are now going on 14 years for the inhumane blockade of Gaza. And as a result of this particular blockade, we can see overcrowding, unsafe housing, a lack of access to clean water and heating, and a really terrible education and health systems. And we think more and more about how important these things are, given that we've just come out of a pandemic. It's so important that we continue to push our own government, because international pressure has made a massive difference. Unfortunately, despite what our government has repeatedly said, they refuse to recognise the state of Palestine. Now, they continuously say that they are in support of a two-state solution, but I ask them, and I've asked them on a few occasions now, and I ask you, how on earth can you support two states if you don't even recognise one? We really need to understand that a two-state solution, or recognising the state of Palestine, is a prerequisite for any just and lasting peace. And until we can do that, until there is some parity, there is really going to be difficult for us to look towards a situation of peace and security for the Palestinian people. So what I would ask of people listening today is to not give up the fight. Do not think, because sometimes we aren't hearing about it as much, that the situation doesn't worsen for the Palestinian people, and to keep standing up for them and their human rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Belle. Such an important message, comrades. Do not give up the fight, and we've got to keep putting Palestine on the agenda. Now, before we move on to our second speaker, I'm actually just going to bring in our Arise volunteer, Logan, to talk to you a bit about what we do at Arise and meetings and events that are coming up.
I also, as Amy said, my name's Logan. I'm an Arise volunteer, and I'm thrilled to be talking to you a bit today about basically a groundbreaking event for us of a month long of these really interesting debates. We've had ones on the issues facing Ireland, the lessons we can learn as a left. We have had ones on how to read Building Crisis and People and Planet with Jeremy Corbyn. And I just wanted to let you know that obviously you can catch those up on our YouTube, but we also have events still carrying on until the 27th of July, the next one being our Defend Our Right to Resist, this coming Wednesday with Shami Chakrabarti and Olivia Blake MP. And then next Monday, we have our Latin American Solidarity, which again looks like it's going to be a fantastic event. If any of you have been following along, you know that our normal plug speaker is usually very energetic in his demands for you to donate. Unfortunately, can't be with us today, but I'm trying to do my best. So we can't do this type of event, have these month-long events where we bring together international speakers as well as local speakers in England and across Britain without your donations. If only 20 person on this call can donate £10 or however much they can, then that really goes us a long way to helping us continue to run these events, hopefully in person again next year as well, and to keep these events going, keep that struggle for progressive internationalist ideas and socialist ideals in Britain alive. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Logan. And I believe the links for donation are in the chat if you are in a position to contribute to Arise. Okay, so on to our next speaker now. We're lucky to be joined by a second wonderful MP. So we are joined by Kim Johnson, who is the MP for Liverpool Riverside. So Kim, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. And I'm really looking forward to listening to some of the speakers, particularly the ambassador, who always speaks so passionately about what's needed to happen in his country. Comrades, I'm a proud trade unionist with a long history of internationalism, but more importantly, I'm a very proud Scouser, proud of how my city stood shoulder to shoulder with our South African brothers and sisters fighting the brutal system of racial segregation and white supremacy. And today is Mandela Day. He spent 67 years fighting for justice, equality, human rights, and the eradication of the racist apartheid regime. So the council boycotted South African goods. Dock workers refused to handle goods, and Ford card workers packed anti-apartheid leaflets into cars shipped to South Africa. University students held sit-ins and charities took direct action. And we've got so much to learn from this shared history of solidarity. And these actions taken by trade unionists, students and our communities brought down that vicious regime. And this is what we need to do now for Palestine. So despite international lip service to a two-state solution, the reality couldn't be further from the truth. Trump's deal of a century gave the green light for unhindered Israeli settlement, expansion and illegal annexation of Palestinian land. And we've seen a drastic escalation in the systematic expulsion of Palestinians from their homes and ramping up of the collective punishment of Palestinians living inside the occupied territories and apartheid Israel. And this includes the indiscriminate attacks on Palestinians, which are met with zero repercussions and justice from the international community. Israel has killed 5 times as many Palestinians this year up to April, including 8 children, as it did in the same period of 2021, including the assassination of journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who, as we've just said, was killed while identified as press. And as Vice Chair of the Britain-Palestine APPG, I've heard personal testimonies from Palestinians living in Israel, in Gaza, the West Bank and refugee camps. And we've heard about the 2-tier legal systems where Palestinian children in the West Bank are put through military courts and imprisoned, the only children in the world where this happens. And in the last 20 years, 10,000 Palestinian children have been held in Israeli military detention system. Palestinian children report being blindfolded, strip searched and subjected to physical violence. Most are not even informed of the reason for the arrest, and the Israeli military court conviction rate is higher than 99%. We've also heard from health workers, including Physicians for Human Rights, who since January 2018 have assisted over 130 children, including breastfed babies, to leave Gaza for medical treatment, but without their parents because visas were refused. We've also heard about the annexation of Palestinian lands, the eviction and dispossession of Palestinians in East Jerusalem, Sheikh Jarrah and Masafa Yatta, and many other places. A modern day Nakba unfolding right in front of us. And in Masafa Yatta, Palestinians are gearing up to fight against the forced transfer of 1,300 Palestinian people from their homes, which will be the largest expulsion since 1967. And the only way of halting this is by ramping up international pressure and repercussions on Israel. US President Biden has just finished his tour of Israel, where he reiterated his friendship with the country, but failed to call out their violations of international law. And his visit demonstrates the lack of serious repercussions for these violations. And without action, the home demolitions, displacement, and creeping land annexation will continue. So what can we do as a Labour Party and a movement? We almost always have to start by making the history of Palestine visible, given Britain's colonial role and establishment of the State of Israel, including the Balfour Declaration. We've got a duty to recognise our responsibility on the ongoing displacement and oppression of Palestinians. And while powerful international actors pay lip service to the two-state solution, we continue to sell weapons to Israel that are used with complete impunity to violate international law, threaten, maim, and kill Palestinians every single day. And at the same time, we cut aid for Palestinians. Last year, the UK spent half what it did in 2020 to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. And this was after Trump stopped all US funding to the agency in 2018. And it's only recently been restored by Biden. And we must campaign for more aid and for stronger measures to hold Israel to account for its violations of international law. Comrades, we know a justice delayed is a justice denied, and this has been the position in Palestine for far too long. The Labour Party needs to recognise that Israel is practising the crime of apartheid as defined by the UN and stand by the Young Labour motion passed last year at a conference. It's our duty to stand with them and demand international accountability until a just and sustainable solution is achieved. Thank you, comrades.
Thank you so much, Kim. You've really laid out some of the stark realities with the numbers and the figures you've quoted in there, and also the call for us all to really look at what our government is doing and stand strong on that motion that we passed at conference last year as well. Thanks so much, Kim. Okay, our next speaker is Yasmin Dar from Labour's NEC. Yasmin, I'll hand over to you.
Good evening, peace and blessings to everyone. And I'm absolutely, first I'd like to say thank you to Arise, the team here, the volunteers, the amazing individuals that have set this up. And I'm absolutely honoured and I feel privileged to be asked to say a few words. And what can I say? As all of you, I too am passionate about humanity. I mean, our leaders today ignore the key lessons of World War II. I suppose that's all wars. They ignore every message, every lesson that we learn. There is a lack of historical memory and moral compass. I mean, do you remember the words, never again, not in my name? We say these words over and over again, but to no avail. We need to awaken the humanity within us to stop the evil of persecution, of oppression. It's got to end. No person should ever, under any circumstance, be left with no rights precisely because, as the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights tells us, disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind. Shame on those leaders who oppress the people of their nations and regions. Shame also on any world leader who stands by and does not condemn those barbaric human rights violations. We need to also remind ourselves that each one of us is a leader in our own right. We need to lead and ensure our family, our friends, our communities are updated regarding the issues on the ground in Palestine. Our vision or mission is to achieve justice, peace, and human rights for all. Definitely not at the expense of another human being. We are all here to stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Palestine. We will not betray their hope for freedom, for their right to a beautiful, dignified life. Too many years have gone by and the oppression and persecution has increased. It's not decreased. This is not the world that our forefathers tried to rebuild after World War II. This is the world of oppressive governments and regimes and leaders past and present. Indeed, we are already living in their cowardly new world, yet it remains in our hands to choose our freedom, to raise our voices, to fight for the freedom of others in our world. Let us remain loyal to our vision of freedom and dignity, justice, and human rights for all. Every human life is valuable, regardless of where you're from, whether it is United Kingdom, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, wherever we are, we need to raise our voices. Standing united, we can make a difference. And many of us are raising our voices from many different organizations and backgrounds. It's absolutely brilliant. Different faiths have come together to stand up against the evil of oppression. This has been really impressive. Remembering we belong to one race, the human race, absolutely paramount to everything of who we are. We need to be loud and clear in our condemnation of the Israeli government's treatment of the Palestinians. And no doubt there are leaders in our world who create death and destruction, but we are leaders for peace and justice, and we need to raise our voices to seek justice for those wronged. I implore our elected members, whether our MPs, our councillors, to raise their voices. Let's stand up for the oppressed in our world. Let's stand up for the Palestinians. I'm just going to read a quote by Edmund Burke, and he says, "All that is required for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." So brothers and sisters, let's not do nothing. Let's lobby our councillors, our MPs, our governments to make sure we raise those issues at every level. We want to wake up for the children of Palestine, whatever the faith and background, and let us stand in solidarity with Palestinians. Let's implement a process of peace, justice, and freedom. and make sure that, you know what, every Palestinian knows that we are here raising our voices for them. We are on your side. We will stand up for the oppressed. We will stand up for the victims of aggression. So solidarity, and it is now time to speak up for Palestine. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Yasmin. You're absolutely right. It's time is now. If not now, then when? One thing you can do right now, if you haven't already done so, is sign the statement "Labour must speak up for Palestine," and the link to that is in the chat. Okay, on to our next speaker. We're going to go now to Hugh Lanning, who is from Labour Palestine. Hugh.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you to everyone who's joining us tonight on this unusually hot night. And thanks to our speakers, Kim and Belle, and everyone else who's going to be joining us during the course of the night, especially Husam, the ambassador. Just to say on behalf of Labour and Palestine, really, we're increasingly in a world of two realities, a sort of mythical one where conspiracies abound and where there's a view that if you're left to your own devices, gun in hand, everything's going to be okay. And as we all know, the world is really flat. And as Joe Biden said, Israel is a democracy. And those two realities we need to challenge and we need to think about, because although I'm always reluctant to make comparisons between Israel and anywhere else, generally they're not needed. Israel's behaviour can be judged on its own by the yardstick of international law. But contrary to my own advice, I want to make a comparison, and that comparison is with Russia. Not the obvious one about how the West reacted to the invasion of Ukraine, instant sanctions galore, compared to its lack of redress for Israel over many years, despite it being in breach of international law. It's more really how prior to the invasion Russia was treated. Russia was an accepted part of Western society. We bought their gas, welcomed their money, ignored their breaches of human rights, dined with them and welcomed Putin. And despite this veneer of respectability, we knew the reality. The invasion of Ukraine was not a shock, and it wasn't an amazing change of character on behalf of the Russian regime. And the same is true of Israel. Biden and others know the reality. Western rulers know that Israel is a violent, undemocratic regime holding a land and a people in a long illegal military occupation. Yet we buy and sell their arms, and we treat Israel as normal, welcome them to play football, have them on Eurovision, and have them in our cycle races. And leaders like Biden and others can keep on believing that the world is flat and saying that Israel is a democracy, but the reality is increasingly being documented, publicized and believed and recognized by more and more people globally. On the back of the excellent reports by Amnesty, Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, the Presbyterian Church in the US voted recently to recognize that Israel was practicing apartheid by establishing two sets of laws, one for Israelis and one for Palestinians, which give preferential treatment to Israeli Jews and oppressive treatment to Palestinians. So our challenge within the Labour Party is to ensure that we don't join the flat earthers and not only be on the wrong side of reality, but also morally reprehensible, refusing to respond to what is going on. The Labour Party conferences in 2018, 19 and 21, has been said, passed overwhelmingly motions supporting Palestine and calling for action to be taken whilst Israel remains in breach of international law. And that policy has been studiously ignored by the Labour's front bench, remaining painfully silent whilst Israel is pursuing a policy of de facto annexation of Palestinian land. And Biden has given Israel a blank check to proceed with its aggressive policies. Israel in the past year and a half has continued creeping annexation, expanded settlements, escalated demolition of Palestinian homes, escalated its raid on Palestinians' homes, and escalated the repression and violence of Palestinian people. And that's been seen with the shooting that's already been referred to of Shireen Abu Akleh. So Israel's High Court of Justice recently ruled that it was okay for Israeli Defense Forces to expel over 1,000 Palestinians from the 8 villages in Masafer Yatta. And that's a region of the West Bank but it's a sort of catch-22 law. The ruling ignores and specifically states that Israeli law trumps international law if there's a conflict. And it's okay to be in breach of that fundamental principle of the Geneva Convention that the occupier cannot and should not settle the territory it occupies. And the term settler colonialism gets bandied around, but this is precisely what it means and what is going on. Seizing the land, driving off the indigenous people, and eliminating them from the land and any political entity that exists. Whatever law Israel creates and invents, the reality prior to the Nakba in 1948 was that Palestinians owned over 90% of the land of historic Palestine between the Mediterranean Sea and Jericho, and the River Jericho. Following the Nakba, Israel took over military control, and then in 1967, it occupied all of the land, and ever since has been on a systematic theft of that land. And that process is quickening, as we've heard. Settlements and settlers are not bravely going in to settle unoccupied land. Since 2022, over 300 structures have been demolished or seized in the West Bank, including within East Jerusalem. This settler occupation is supported by violence and by settlers supported and protected by the Israeli forces. In its annual Children and Armed Conflict report, the UN recently said that the Israeli forces had killed 78 Palestinian children, maimed another 982, and detained 637 in 2021 alone. So this led the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres to say that if this continued, as it surely will, then Israel must go onto the blacklist of violence. But LNP, Labour and Palestine, we've submitted evidence around this about party policy, party policy conference discussion that's taking place, and many others have commented in a similar vein. But we're under no illusions that the draft policy document that was put out for consultation says little or nothing about Palestine, and we need to try and make sure that the next Labour government will have Palestine in its agenda and be prepared to do something about it. With the Tory government, once it's got over its little local difficulties, still threatening to have legislation to make disinvestment and sanctions of Israeli companies impossible, we need Labour to be speaking up for Palestine, not hearing and seeing no evil and remaining silent. So in amongst the heat and the cost of living crisis, Israel would really like the world to forget about Palestine and ignore what is going on. We will be complicit in that conspiracy that is trying to normalize Israel if we don't speak up. The world is not flat, Israel is not a democracy, and Palestine will be free. Thank you for joining us, and please support the debate within the Labour Party and Labour in Palestine. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hugh. Again, really important points made in there, as with all our speakers. The global recognition of apartheid is crucial here. We need to keep saying that word, and we will not stop saying it as in this meeting. I'm so pleased to see you around. There's hundreds of people joining us from all across the UK today. We've got people from Hull, Bedford, Eastbourne, Somerset, London, Peterborough, Kenilworth, Bristol, all across the UK. So thank you to everyone who's made time to come and listen today. I'll just pick up on one last thing that Hugh said there around the right to boycott. We do have a motion from Labour and Palestine that you can take to your CLPs, and the link to that has been posted in the chat. Now on to our next speaker, who is such an important voice. It's His Excellency the Ambassador Husam Zomlot, and it's so important that you're here today, Husam, and it's a real honour to have you with us here today. So let me hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Amy, and my honourable members of Parliament, friends, speakers. What a pleasure it is to be speaking to you today, and what a stellar lineup of contributors. First, I would like to thank the organisers for this important opportunity. Arise, Labour and Palestine, Hugh, Lanning, Patrick Foley, Matt, Will Grace, and all those who have put together such an inspiring gathering, as well as my fellow speakers on this panel. I will jump straight into it, since I know we are a number of speakers and we only have so much time. And given the heat, sometimes Zoom can be of help. Let me start by saying that while traditionally the left around the world, the progressive movement, has been a natural ally to the Palestinian people, I do not believe that justice for Palestinians is a question of left or right politics. On the contrary, I believe this is, or ought to be, a universal cause, because justice for Palestinians is not just that. Palestine is not a divide between left and right, but between right and wrong. Justice for the Palestinian people is a question for international law and order. It is about the extent to which we want to live in a world where international relations are governed by rules, or one in which only the language of force counts. These are the two choices. And I heard Yasmin just earlier about the Never Again and the system we built together after the horrors of the Second World War, and spot on, Yasmin. That is the question. It is also a matter of principle, specifically the related principle of equality before the law. For there to be any international system of justice, it must be predicated on the principle that all actors are judged by the same rules and face the very same consequences for their actions. This is patently not true for Israel. And this is the fundamental reason we are where we are today. And so, my friends, for too long there has been an Israel exception, the exceptionalism about Israel, even on the left, by the way, where it is known as, there is a term for it, as PEP, progressive except for Palestine. Israel has been, and I've encountered that in the US, I encountered this in Europe, even here in the UK. Israel has been allowed to ignore international law, international humanitarian law, and simple common decency for nearly 75 years without any consequences. We, the people of Palestine, have been forcibly, as you all know, removed from our homeland and denied our right of return since 1948. We have watched as our homes and lands were taken away, stolen from us, and as they continue to be stolen from us as we speak, in Masafir Yatta, in Sheikh Jarrah, all over the occupied Palestinian territories. We have endured as refugees, including my own parents, my own family, and myself, as a people under occupation, as a people denied our most basic rights. We watch our children being murdered and imprisoned on a daily basis, We watch our journalists are killed while doing their jobs. We see our homes demolished, our trees uprooted. You're talking about millions of trees that were planted since the Roman time. Our natural resources stolen, our villages destroyed, and our futures taken away. And what are we told by world leaders? They will tell us one day, as expressed, by the way, by the US President Biden just 2 days ago during his visit to Palestine. He told us that perhaps one day we will achieve our rights, one day peace will prevail, one day the two-state solution will happen. One day we may enjoy the same rights as others. One day. In the meantime, my friends, we are supposed to do what exactly? That's the question. What are we supposed to do? Sit and watch as Israel steals more and more of our land, or its illegal settlements. Sit and watch as our people are brutalized and discriminated against, as our children grow up without hope for their futures, as our refugees are left scrabbling for the barest means of survival. One day is not good enough. It isn't good enough. That Israel exception has done untold damage. It has even brought the world apartheid 2.0. The new apartheid of the world as mentioned by previous speakers. It is almost impossible to believe that after the world joined forces to end apartheid South Africa, it has only sat and watched as apartheid Israel continues its law breaking. I can assure you, my friends, had the world reacted at any point over the past 74 years to Israel's crimes the way it has reacted to the invasion of Ukraine, we would not be here right now today. So, my friends, it does not have to be this way. It does not have to be that the US helps Israel cover up, whitewash every single crime, including Israel's assassination of the Palestinian prominent journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. You know the statement from the US State Department only recently that they have inconclusive evidence about the murder of Shireen Abu Akleh, that the bullet was severely damaged, whitewashing, covering up, as we have experienced over 70 odd years. When in fact, Shireen Abu Akleh is a Palestinian American citizen. She is a US citizen to start with. The US is willing to go that far to protect, to shield Israel from accountability. It does not have to be that the UK, the United Kingdom, rewards Israel, not even hold Israel accountable, reward Israel with more trade and arms deals as happened this year. And if you go and read the strategic memorandum of understanding, you will see the unconditional trade and arms deals with Israel. It does not have to be that the UK, the US, Western governments continue shielding Israel from any scrutiny by the international system, including the ICC, as mentioned earlier. It does not have to be that the Prime Minister of the UK issues a public letter committing that Israel will not be sent to the ICC and that the Palestinians will not have access to the International Criminal Court. Only a couple of weeks after the invasion of Ukraine, the UK was leading the efforts to take Russia to the ICC. This is exactly how the international system will be undermined, will break down. It does not have to be that these governments are still shielding Israel even from you, from global citizens like you, from global citizens attempting to use their stomach, their pockets to mark the illegality. As you are following in the UK Parliament now, the attempts to actually stifle and prevent anyone from divesting or actually using their own means to make sure that they are in solidarity with the people under oppression. We can look, however, my friends, we can look to the anti-apartheid movement of the 70s and 80s that brought apartheid South Africa to an end as a model for moving forward. All of us, ordinary people, grassroots organizations, and the global human rights sector have all come together to the same conclusion. Israel's crime can no longer go unpunished, like in South Africa, like during the apartheid time of South Africa and the struggle. Rights activists like you, members of parliaments like you, cultural celebrities and singers and musicians and all over, concerned citizens, politicians, community leaders. We must join forces, my friends, to pressure governments here in the US, in Europe and elsewhere, because it is these governments around the world, notably in the US and the UK, by the way, that are protecting Israel. And if we are serious about change, we need to convince those governments that this protection, this Israeli exceptionalism, this Israel above the law, this culture of impunity is doing no one any favors. It's doing no one any favors, including the Israelis. And this is not just for the sake of the Palestinian people, my friends, though of course we are the ones suffering the Israeli crimes. This is for the sake of a better world, one in which all are treated equally, none are discriminated against, and laws are enforced even against the powerful. Even, that's the whole idea of law. That's the whole idea of enforcement, even against the powerful, even against your friends. Don't pick and choose. This is not cherry picking that you enforce the law when it is your foe, but you absolutely make mockery of the law when it is your friend. Only that way, my friends, lies a better tomorrow for all of us, one in which the great disparities in wealth and rights that we are seeing all around the world, all around us, can begin to be addressed. Only that way we truly honor the memory of those who perished in the past, whether in Palestine or in Europe or elsewhere, during the horrors of World War II, the horrors that led to the attempt to create a new global rules-based order that protect all of us, that treat all of us equally. So my friends, I will end here. Palestine is still the issue. It is the issue. It is time we change the reality. It is time to speak up, as you started, as the slogan of your meeting. It is time to speak up about Palestine, loud, clear, and relentless. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Husam. It's always so galvanizing to hear you speak. It's a chance to hear you speak on this subject, and hopefully everyone goes away from the meeting feeling energized to take actions, not just personally by writing to MPs, supporting their motions around boycott, but in solidarity as well with your comrades here and abroad. We're going to go on to our next speaker now. So going to Lubaba Khalid, who is a young voice in the Palestinian movement. She's a young Labour activist. So Lubaba, I'll hand over to you.
Hi everybody, I hope you all are well and handling the heat well. Firstly, I'd like to thank Arise for hosting such an important conversation. So my story is one that is very similar to many Palestinians around the world and in Palestine. My great-grandparents became refugees in 1948, fleeing the village of Aqir to Gaza due to the Nakba, also known as the Palestinian catastrophe. My family settled in Gaza, though they thought it was only temporary. 74 years later, my family are still refugees in Gaza in a camp or mukhayyam called Insirat. This story is not unique to me, but one of many Palestinians who yearn to have their right to return. We're living in a time where Palestinian activism is under attack more than ever. We have the Tories who reward MPs who have illegal meetings with Israel with roles in the cabinet. We have a Labour Party leadership completely ignoring the Solidarity with Palestinian Liberation Struggle motion, which was passed in Labour's National Conference. This has provided the perfect breeding ground for attacks against pro-Palestinian activism. As Labour activists who stand for justice and peace, we know that this is our responsibility to give them our absolute solidarity. And we also know that solidarity is a verb. So what does this look like in our communities? We know the Nakba is not just of Israel's making. Behind every bullet, shell, and bulldozer stands the political, economic, and military support of the ruling elites of the world, paid by the United States and made in the United Kingdom. Our universities profit from this, and the Labour Party is complacent in this. As activists involved in the Labour Party, we should defend and extend the campaign to boycott, divest, and sanction the apartheid state of Israel. Contact your councillor to push for the BDS motion, an anti-prevent policy, and organise against the police and crime bill. Write to university management and demand that the ethical investment policy includes divesting from businesses that profit from apartheid. Within the Labour Party, we should defend the absolute collective right of Palestinians to return and their right to self-defense and their anti-colonial struggle. Write to your MP, host Q&As with your local Labour MPs or members of the shadow cabinet and ask them what are they doing to end the ethnic cleansing. For those who were involved in Labour during the 2019 general election, part of Labour's manifesto of internationalism included key pledges on Palestine. Some of them were to immediately suspend the sales of arms to Israel for arms used in violation of the human rights of Palestinian civilians, to conduct a root and branch reform of our arms exports regime where British-made weapons are used to target innocent civilians, and reform international rules-based order to secure justice and accountability for breaches of human rights and international law, such as the bombing of hospitals and schools and the illegal blockade of the Gaza Strip. Young people at the Labour's Party, young people are the Labour's Party's biggest campaigning group, and we must demand that the new leadership of the Labour Party reaffirm their commitment to supporting the rights of Palestinians and the Palestinian diaspora. I know it can seem overwhelming and sometimes disappointing when you're constantly trying to make change within the party, but know that you're never alone. There are hundreds of people who did this work before you and will continue to support you. Finally, we must remember that no matter how impossible it is made to seem, the truth is that every regime can fall. and every period in history comes to an end. So today we must choose where we'll stand and how firmly we stand there. I hope we will soon live in a world where our governments stand for the many and that the Palestinian people are free. Thank you.
Thank you, Lubaba. That was really inspiring. Thank you for the message of hope at the end there as well, which is lovely to hear. And for the practical list, very long list of things people can do right now in their CLPs and the constituencies themselves to take action on this. And I will just draw attention to the fact that Lubaba is standing to be Young Labour's BAME officer, and you can find out more about that in a link in our chat. Now, before we go on to the final speaker, I'd just like to thank all of our speakers, and thanks as well to everyone who's joined us to watch today. As Labour movement activists who stand with the Palestinian people internationally, it's our job here to raise awareness of these issues and speak up in solidarity with the people of Palestine. We all need your help to make sure that we collectively speak up as loudly as we can for Palestine. So please go away from this meeting and sign up all your local members to our statement that's been posted in the chat. Invite people from Labour and Palestine to speak at your branch or CLP. Follow us on social media and spread the word and crucially pass that model motion that's also been popped in the chat. Pass that at your branch and your CLP. So thanks to you all and solidarity. And now on to our last speaker, who is Louise Regan, who's from the National Education Union and the Palestine Solidarity Campaign.
Hi, Amy. Thank you so much. And thanks to all the previous speakers. It's always very powerful to be on a meeting where people are talking about support for Palestine, which is very key to me, really. It's a really important part of what I do. I just want to say a couple of things. I mean, Lubaba, what you said was just amazing and very powerful. So thank you so much. And I hope people get behind your campaign, because we need people like you on the NEC and fighting for us. My name is Louise Regan. I am a national officer of the National Education Union, which has a very long history of support of the Palestinian people. I'm also the Vice Chair of Palestine's Solidarity Campaign nationally. I'm aware it's very hot and late, but I will say a few things before I let everybody go and try and cool down a bit, really. So just in terms of what I think, what I'm not going to do is give any sort of history really to things which I think everybody has done really well, but I am going to talk a little bit around what I think trade unions should do. I became involved in this campaign because of my trade union. And trade unions are at the heart of campaigning around the issue of Palestine, not only through Palestine Solidarity Campaign, but also through Labour and Palestine. And I became involved because I went to a conference where we had over 1,000 delegates, and we had a speaker come to talk to us to the whole conference from DCI Palestine, Defence for Children International Palestine. Our conferences, I don't know if other people are in trade unions and go to conferences, but they're very fussy. So people are rarely quiet. However, he came and he started to address the conference, and there was silence. You could have heard a pin drop. And he spoke about the treatment of children. And because I'm an educator, to listen to children being arrested in the middle of the night, to them being blindfolded, children as young as 12, blindfolded, shackled, tied with plastic ties, thrown on the floor of military trucks, their parents not being told why they were being arrested or where they were being taken, and what then happened to them once they arrived in military detention, the way that they were treated, the things that they underwent was just absolutely shocking. And following that meeting, we had a fringe meeting where he spoke again, and again, the fringe meeting was absolutely huge. And many, many members became involved and active in Palestine at that point, which is a long time ago. My union, along with many unions, takes delegations to Palestine. We do a huge amount of work supporting actions, attending demonstrations, but I think delegations are a key part of what trade unions do. Those delegations allow our members to see on the ground what is happening in Palestine. And I have to say, for anybody in here who's in a trade union, if your union doesn't take delegations, you should go back and ask them to get involved and to take people to Palestine to see what happens. Because not only do our members come back and speak confidently about what is happening in Palestine, because when I speak about Palestine, I'm able to say, I'm talking about things I've seen. I'm not telling you something which somebody else has told me. I'm telling you things that I've seen. I've seen children being arrested in Palestine. I've seen tear gas being thrown into school playgrounds as primary school children are playing. I've seen military on top of a primary school with children terrified about what is happening. I have seen those things happen. So I know that that is the truth of the situation there. And I think that is really important. But not only do they come back activists who are able to come back and speak confidently about what is happening, they become very active around this campaign, but also all trade union campaigns. They recognise that as trade unionists, we're not just about what campaigning for us, we're campaigning for a world that is better for everyone. And if at the heart of that isn't Palestine, I don't know what will be at the heart of it. Because for me, the Palestinian cause has gone on for too long, as we have heard. There has not been an outcry about what is happening. People haven't enacted and enforced motions that have been passed, international law, and the Palestinian people continue to be ignored on a daily basis, not only by our government, but by many governments globally and by many people. But what I would say is, I think more and more people are speaking out. And somebody earlier referred to the fact that people are feeling threatened and feel that they shouldn't. What I would say to each and every one of you is, at some point in your life, you have to choose where you stand, and you have to choose whether you stand on the side of right with the oppressed or whether you stand with the oppressor. And for me, it's a very easy choice. I will always stand with the oppressed and speak out on behalf of them. And the final thing that I want to say is this. When we go to Palestine and we take delegations, we visit Sheikh Jarrah in East Jerusalem, and we meet with families there who have faced terrible things. The situation is dreadful for them, but yet again facing further evictions from their homes, having already gone through a Nakba. And they welcome us into their home. I'm always very humbled when I go to Palestine. I've visited many countries. I've been very lucky as a national officer in my union to visit and meet many, many people globally. But I have to say, the Palestinians are the people that are the most welcoming, most caring, most humbling for me. And they welcome us into their home and tell us their story, which is truly devastating. And often members get upset, and I understand that. It is heart-wrenching. And on one of the visits, a member started crying, and the man that was speaking to us came up to her and sort of hugged her and just said, look, you know, we thank you for your tears, but we don't need your tears. We need your words. We need you to go back, and we need you to tell everyone what is happening to us, because we have no voice. Nobody tells our story. And I've always that's what I take away now. Whenever I am out and speaking, I always think of that person telling me that they have no voice, and they have a right to have a voice, and we have to be their voice. We have to continue speaking out. We have to continue fighting until we get justice and peace for the Palestinian people, because we owe that to them. Based on everything that we have heard from other speakers tonight. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I'm always, as I say, privileged to be here. Such fantastic speakers this evening, such powerful voices, and we all have to keep speaking out. And the last thing I'm going to say is this: when I leave this call, I'm going to go and donate to Arise, and I want all of you who are listening to do the same. Click on that link and make a donation. Because the more people that are allowing these voices to be heard and speaking about the Palestine issue, the better it is. So please donate. Thank you to Labour and Palestine for hosting this with Arise. Join Palestine Solidarity Campaign, sign Labour and Palestine letter, and make sure you're following all of these people on social media, because that's where you will learn about what is happening. Thank you very much, Amy, and everyone.
Thanks so much, Louise. Thanks everyone for coming today. Solidarity, comrades, and take care in the heat.